Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you bake to the future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Joel.
And today we're excited to have Andy Brimacombe, president of Puratos USA, with us to talk about how Puratos has been doing during this global pandemic and national crisis, and share some insights from his perspective as a supplier to the baking industry.
Puratos is a global company based in Belgium with customers in more than 100 countries around the world. Their USA headquarters is in New Jersey, and they have a presence in 6 regions with 5 production plants, 7 innovation centers, and 850 employees. Puratos USA serves customers in a variety of channels, including industrial bakers, retailers, food service operators, artisan bakers, distributors, and chocolatiers.
And Andy is responsible for Puratos' strategic, commercial, and operational activities across the U.S. Before his current role, Andy worked for a global baking company in the U.S. and Europe in multiple capacities, doing marketing, commercialization, and procurement before moving into general management as USA president. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.
We're excited to have you. And before we dive into all the topics today, we have a few hard questions that I warned you about. First of all, where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually at home today. So I live just outside Philadelphia, actually on the Pennsylvania side rather than on the New Jersey side where our office is.
Cool. And another tough question. What is your favorite baked good?
Oh, that's a really tough one. There are so many. I think I'm a sucker for a really good croissant.
Good answer.
Buttery goodness. One of my favorite bakery tours I've been on was to a croissant factory. And, not only are the mechanics of seeing thousands of croissants get made amazing, the smell and then the taste testing afterwards is also a delight. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to the baking industry? What brought you to Puratos? What do you do?
Yeah. So I grew up, as you may be able to hear, in the UK. I studied in the UK and France, and my first job out of business school was working for different management consultancy firms. So I had an amazing opportunity to travel a lot, to see different industries and parts of the world. But I really guess I found my passion and my love for the baking industry through an assignment with one of those consultancies where I worked for a global baked goods company. Pretty quickly, I really enjoyed it. So I ended up being offered a staff role. I worked for them in Europe, and then within a year, I had transitioned to the US. And so I've been in the US since 2014. I got to know Puratos really well through that prior company. And in fact, I was a speaker at the Taste Tomorrow Consumer Insights event that they did in 2015. But in spite of that, they put me through a lot of interviews. And I joined them in 2018 as US president.
And what would you say, what was it about the baking industry that really drew you to it?
Well, a little joke I have is that when I was working in consultancy, it was very difficult to tell my mom what I did. So when I started working in the baking industry, I could tell her very easily exactly what it was I did. But I've always had a great passion for food. My wife and I are big foodies. We love it. And I think baking is, one of the most time-tested, honest kind of professions you can imagine. And it has incredible creativity. But at the same time, as I've found out more and more as I've joined Puratos, the science behind it is also fascinating. So I think there are so many angles when you blend art and science and human emotion, and you look at the joy that the baked goods and food can bring to people. I think it's just wonderful to be part of that.
That's really poetic to say. I think that a lot of people join for those reasons. And then, I think that sometimes people get in the grind and it's just a job. But then when you really take a step back and think about why you're in this industry and why you do what you do, it does come down to a lot of those factors that you just talked about. So talk to us a little bit about, and this is, again, another kind of two-parted question, what you do in your daily job, and then how your company, how Puratos USA is doing with the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, sure. So it's always the old cliche for someone in my type of role is that every day is different. But of course, it's a cliche because it's true. But what I try and focus on is customers and products, our operations and our people. Those are the things that I look at my time and say, am I spending enough time on each of those things? Am I balancing time across those factors? And obviously, I look at the future and try and split my time between planning for the future and then also ensuring that we're delivering as a company for our customers and our stakeholders in the here and now. I really like getting out with customers. It's a huge passion for me. It's great to get to be able to meet people and to learn from them. I love going out in our factories and being with our people. That's obviously been a little bit different of late. With virtual technologies, but we still manage to do an okay job of remaining connected. In terms of your question regarding the crisis, I mean, I guess first of all, I would say that I feel very fortunate to be at Puratos because it's a very resilient organization with a really strong financial and market position. But there's no question whatsoever that we felt the impact of the crisis. I guess if you step back and you look at our business, we're really a reflection of the market. So you've got areas like the commercial aisle baked goods have been selling much more than prior year and have done fantastically well. And then the other end of the scale, you have artisan bakeries that have had to close down. So we see some puts and takes in our business, but overall, we're pretty pleased with where we're doing. I think on the people side of things, I think this crisis has been an amazing experience in one way because our people continue to provide amazing inspiration with how they've handled it, with how they've dealt with it, with how they've responded to the challenges, how they've put each other first, and how they've put our customers first. So I'm very proud of them on that level. And I was just in one of our plants the other day, and I had the opportunity to meet with some of our team and some of our more tenured employees. And we have people who have been with us for over 20 years. Through this crisis, they've not missed a day. And what they talk about is their hunger and their desire to serve our customers. And I think that's fantastic. And I think it's very representative of what I've heard from other people and customers across the baking industry.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think just hearing about how people are so dedicated to continue to go to work and continue their job, that's really amazing to hear. I was curious about your digital strategy. You mentioned, we were talking earlier about how during the crisis you've shifted a lot to more digital. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is it came out of need because essentially what we find is that a lot of customers use Puratos not only for our products, but for the fantastic technical skills that so many of our team have, and they rely on those skills. So, and in many cases, as demand really ramped up in March, even after the lockdown, to fill the grocery stores, people were relying on us more than ever. So the team very quickly moved a lot of the calls that they would have done physically online, just using simple platforms like Zoom. But then we built that out more, thinking, well, actually, this could be a need in a service. People are having to adapt to social distancing. They're having to change recipes and change work procedures as a result of this. How can we support them in this? So we set up a capability which we call MyLink. That's a technical hotline. It has a chat feature and facility. And we've also been doing webinars on specific topics. So general topics for the industry as a whole, We sponsored one, for example, yesterday with the ABA on health and well-being, but we've also been doing various different topics as well, sometimes specifically for one customer. And we had our first virtual plant tour as well to solve a particular problem the other week. So I think it's fantastic to see how our teams responded, but not just our team, the industry as a whole and our customers have really not let the limitations and the barriers that we have in place at the moment impede their business. And I think people are coming together really well to make progress.
And it does sound like you've taken some of these challenges and turned them into opportunities, and as a way to kind of pivot how some of your operations handle, at least from, like what you were saying with virtual plant tours and virtually meeting with some of your experts. So would you say, kind of thinking back, like what you were just talking about with some of your customers having to change recipes and kind of changing how they do things a little bit, have you seen some of your products and some ingredients doing better than normal, having higher sales, or has there been anything unexpected from that side?
Well, yeah, one thing I guess we may have thought about was that health and well-being products would sustain through this, because I think when there's a health crisis, there's obviously people have concern for their health. I think is a very natural reaction. When we look in the US and also when we look globally, actually our health and well-being products were at the height of the crisis, were one of the few that remained in growth year over year. Obviously, we did and we expected to see with the closures declines in other categories. But in spite of that, health and well-being has been a huge focus for consumers.
So what are some of those ingredients when you talk, and you'll have to excuse me because I'm not a baker and I'm still very new to this industry. So when you're saying health and wellness, what does that mean from Puratos perspective?
Yeah, we like to think about it as more and less. So more grains and seeds, more fibers. And those are things that can obviously, they're not one shots, but if you integrate those with your diet over time, then there's enough reliable science to suggest that's going to have health benefits as part of a balanced diet. The less is the less fat and the less sugar. And so we're seeing more demand for products that meet either of those attributes.
And I know that we are seeing a lot of states starting to open up so far. Is the health and wellness trend, do you foresee that continuing as states start to open up?
Yeah, I think one reflection that we've had, and I think it's certainly been talked about a lot in the media, is that these crises tend to accelerate trends rather than introduce completely new phenomena. So we're seeing health and well-being was already a journey that we were on as a company, and I think the wider industry was really on. I think what we've seen is a huge acceleration in health and well-being, just like we've seen the move to digital and online. Those things were there and they were present before the crisis. The crisis has precipitated and increased the urgency for all of us to make moves in those directions.
Do you think that there are any kind of outliers that that may have come up that you didn't expect? So we're talking about digital, the progression of digital very quickly, both from a business perspective and probably from the ingredient development perspective, and then the health and wellness. Are there any outliers that you've seen or that you kind of see maybe coming up?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it an outlier, because I think if you stop to reflect, you could have predicted it a bit more. But I think snacking was one thing that came out a lot. So with people clearly spending more time at home, and day parts are becoming increasingly more fluid. And so snacking is something that we see in the US being significantly on the rise. And therefore, customers are obviously trying to respond to that need and thinking about that. And particularly healthy snacking now is a concern as well for people.
And so we know that Puratos is a global company. So could you maybe tell us about how you've seen the U.S. markets in relation to markets around the world?
Yeah, sure. I think there are clearly some differences, but there's also many similarities and potentially more similarities. I think once the crisis started to hit, most countries went through a familiar pattern, which was that there was a spike in sales in food as people were anticipating the lockdowns. Once the lockdowns kicked in, then we saw obviously declines in sales, and then as markets begin to open up, we're seeing that recovery. Different markets from a baked goods perspective have different focus areas. So in parts of South America and Europe, patisserie and celebration cakes are huge parts of those cultures. So kind of think Paris without patisserie. Those areas really shut down and declined very significantly. Our market is more sweet goods focused with muffins, cookies, brownies, and those types of products, which people did have. So demand in some of those in those areas changed. I think what was pretty similar the world over, though, is that people went to the staples like breads, and particularly healthy breads and grain products. So we saw good demand for all of those things across the world. We talked a little bit about health and well-being already, but that definitely was something that we saw resonate on a global level. But also talking to some of my colleagues in different parts of the world, and I guess it's if you look at the more developed markets versus some of the developing economies, people also experience the crisis quite differently. And I think it's been very tough for everybody here in the US. But equally, it's been tough in countries where the living conditions are generally more cramped, where there's a higher dependence on public transportation, and that makes social distancing much more hard to enforce in practice. I'm thinking of mega cities like Mexico City, Sao Paulo, and Mumbai in India. Some of those places clearly, very very tough places to operate during this type of health crisis.
And you were talking about kind of these global challenges, and I think that your company, because of where you sit in the supply chain, you probably had a little bit of a head start, or you had a little bit of an understanding kind of from a global perspective of where next waves were coming. So I just think that that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate because I guess that's the huge advantage to being part of a global group, in that we saw obviously the crisis start to happen early in the year in Asia and in China in particular. So there were a lot of learnings that we could take from our Chinese business and apply. And we have a very strong team at our headquarters in Belgium who were able to document and understand those and then share both the issues and the responses with countries around the world. So we had a little bit of a view an advanced view as to what to expect as the crisis hit here.
And as you've been working across the globe on, not only this issue, we'd be remiss not to talk about more recent civil unrest here in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement. And is that something that at the corporate level you guys are addressing?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no way that we can't address it. It was horrifying. I think the George Floyd incident was terrible. But I think the broader point is that it's not an isolated incident, which is the most troubling thing. And people are reacting strongly to that, and absolutely rightly so. We're taking time as an organization to understand the core issues and to reflect and how we address this. We tried to do some positive things in the short term, such as we had a Zoom class with doing exercise with a lot of our employees all together, and people donated money to Embrace Race, which is a great charity fighting racism every day and driving education. As a team, we're trying to get more educated. We're listening to our people. We're trying to understand. And we're taking that input to formulate our strategy and figure out how we move forward together from here.
I think that's great. I think it's really, we're seeing a lot of companies take a step back and look at what's going on within the company and around them and their communities. And so that's great to hear that Puratos is reflecting on that.
Yeah, and I think community involvement is something that's been very important to us at Puratos for a long time. So at a global level, we're well known for our social contribution for things like the bakery schools we have in cities like Mexico City, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and then also programs like Cacao Trace, which is our value sharing program for chocolate, where we pay a premium for a higher quality bean, and then we give back a portion of the proceeds through a bonus to farmers. We've continued to support both those programs through this crisis and the people involved in that, because that's very important to our organization, and it's very important to our shareholders as a family company. Closer to home in the US, though, we've seen tremendous need, and I'm really proud of the team and the work that they've been doing to support our focus areas, which is around education and hunger. And it's also been amazing to see the partnership that we've built with various customers, because we're obviously an ingredient supplier. So we need someone to create the finished goods, and it's the generosity and the willingness to help from so many customers has been really fantastic and humbling to see.
Is that the hashtag sourdough difference campaign?
Yeah, the hashtag sourdough difference is absolutely a core part of that. So what our team did there was they saw that sourdough is obviously the star of the crisis, if you like. So many people now are creating their own sourdoughs at home. So there's a huge movement and huge interest around sourdough has been very well documented in industry press. So we thought we could bring together that trend with a good cause. So we're encouraging people to be able to tell their stories about their sourdough experiences on social media using the hashtag sourdough difference. So for every hashtag that's used, we're going to donate $1 to Ronald McDonald House, which is obviously a fantastic charity doing great work.
That's awesome. And before we conclude today, I have to ask you, since we are a future-focused podcast, I have to ask you about what you foresee as the future of the baking industry. We touched on it a little bit before with health and wellness, but what do you think that the baking industry might look like as we emerge from this crisis?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that it's a position of optimism. When the crisis hit, what you saw a lot of people doing is going back to basics. And one of the things that they did was they baked at home for a sense of comfort, for a sense of joy, to pass some time. And so with that, it shows people's deep love for baked goods and the solace that it brings them in difficult times. I think our research that we've done as well has shown that the home baking is expected to endure. So we've done research studies in China, Germany, and Poland so far, and we're continuing that across different countries. We'll do that in July in the US. But 94% of people surveyed so far are saying that they intend to come to do home baking. So I think we're coming from a position of strength as an industry, which is really fantastic. What we're seeing on top of that is in our Taste Tomorrow research, we talk about the baked goods triangle. So health, freshness, and taste being the key things as to why people buy baked goods. What we're seeing is that price or affordability and hygiene are also becoming trends. And as I mentioned, in the US, I expect snacking to become an even more significant trend over time. The other thing I think you can't possibly ignore in the moment is the explosion in online sales. So I think that's here to stay. And I think we've been talking for a couple of years as an industry is that brings us a different set of challenges, because we're a sensory industry where people buy both with their sense of smell and with their eyes. And when you're buying online, it's a different purchase experience. And so that's a challenge that we're going to have to continue to work through as an industry, because I think is something that's going to be here to stay. As Puratos, we've done a couple of things to try and help that, to really help our artisan bakers. We've launched a platform called Bakers Online, which integrates into their website and effectively allows them to set up an online click and collect service so that customers can pre-order baked goods, a bit like you can do on a mobile application for something like Starbucks. And they have a pretty much a plug and play solution where they can do that. We've deployed our My Puratos web shop as well to try and make purchasing more streamlined and easy. So I think we're going to see these type of tools and more virtual collaboration become the norm in the industry, as well as those product focused trends that I talked about. I don't think we should rule out some further consolidation in the industry as well. We've seen a few acquisitions and mergers in the last few months. I think there's going to be a bit of that moving forward as well. But really, my position is one of fantastic optimism. When I kind of step back and I look at, one, the demand from consumers, but two, the level of innovation and response, and to be honest, the humbling goodwill of people in the baked industry, I think we've got fantastic reasons for optimism.
I do like ending things on an optimistic note, and I like what you were talking about with the customization of ordering things, and it just reminds me a lot of the artisan marketplace at IBIE. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of the hard work from you and everyone at Puratos during all of this, at any time, but especially during the last several months as the entire supply chain has been challenged. Without our ingredient suppliers, we would not have baked goods and we'd be in a really bad spot. So thank you for all the hard work from everyone there.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to let our listeners know that if you enjoyed this podcast, we have many more. So please go to baketothefuture.org to find more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to Bake to the Future wherever you listen to podcasts.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.